Hi, I'm Helmut Licht. Welcome to my second video on the Decanate chart. In my first video, I explained to you all about the Decanate chart, and then I promised you at the end that I will show you how, at certain times, planets will jump. So let's jump right into it. In the first video, we discussed that every sign, in this case Aries, is divided into three 10-degree sections called decanates. Aries happens to belong to the fire triplicity, which is Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The first decanate, the first 10-degree area, corresponds to the entire sign. The second decanate corresponds to the second sign of the triplicity, in this case Leo. And the third decanate corresponds to the third sign of the triplicity, in this case Sagittarius. Which means if Mars were located in the first 10 degrees of Aries, its decanate twin would still be in Aries. And if Venus were located in the second 10 degrees of Aries, its decanate twin would end up in Leo. And if Saturn were located in the third 10 degrees of Aries, its decanate twin would be in Sagittarius. In the decanate chart, thus far, we've only discussed a natal chart, which means nothing is moving. But we do know that planets move by transit and progressions. So let's see what happens to a planet as it transits or progresses through the zodiac, and also its decanate twin as it progresses and moves through the decanate chart. Remember now, we have two zodiacs here. One is the regular zodiac and one is the decanate zodiac. As you can see, in the decanate zodiac, the planets move 3 times as fast as in the regular zodiac. And watch what happens when the planet in the regular zodiac gets to the end of the decanate. The decanate planet has jumped 3 signs into Leo. And I always like to justify a new astrological concept by relating it to a real life situation, if possible. If I wanted to take a train from Washington to Boston, I could take the local, which would stop in all the little stops along the way, like Philadelphia, Trenton, New Brunswick, Newark, Yonkers, Stamford, and so on. Or I could take an express train, which would only stop in Philadelphia, New York, and then Boston. In other words, it would skip over Trenton, New Brunswick, Newark, Yonkers, and so on. All right, look at a piano. Look at music. Here's a keyboard. We don't just go up one note at a time. How boring would that be? No, we skip a few notes now and then, okay? Like this. And Johann Strauss knew that. So what did he do? He skipped a few notes too. Just trying to make a point.
So there you have skips in real life.
So why shouldn't there be a skipping in astrology?
And the decanate chart gives them to you. So now let's resume following our 2 planets around the zodiac. The outer one being the regular zodiac and the inner one, the decanate chart zodiac. The regular planet in the outside ring is moving through the second decanate of Aries, which is Leo, and its decanate twin is moving through the sign of Leo at 3 times the speed. And once again, when the regular planet enters a new decanate, the decanate twin skips 3 more signs into the next fire sign, which is Sagittarius here. The planet and its decanate twin continue their journey until the planet reaches the end of Aries. Now watch what happens then.
Not only does the decanate twin skip 3 signs, but this time 4 signs.
They enter Taurus and thereby the Earth triplicity. And from there, they continue their journey. The first decanate of Taurus, then the second one, and then the third, and from there into the air triplicity. First of Gemini, second decanate of Gemini, and the third decanate of Gemini. And from there into the water triplicity. Cancer, first decanate, then the second decanate, and the third. And the planet's journey is now 1/3 complete, as they have finished the first set of the triplicities. The second set will begin again with a fire sign, this time Leo, and then the third set will begin with Sagittarius, the third fire sign.
What this means is that even though a planet may be going through the last 10 degrees of Cancer, its decanate twin is moving through Pisces, thereby widening the planet's influence. The idea of a planet exerting its influence beyond where it is located is nothing new. Look at this chart here. Venus is located in the 7th house, and we say because it's located there, it rules the 7th house. Venus also rules the sign Taurus on the 6th house cusp and the sign Libra on the 11th house cusp. Thereby, Venus also rules the 6th house and the 11th house. Let's bring in Neptune and also the Moon and have each of those two planets form an aspect to Venus. By aspecting Venus, Venus has now also influence over the house in which Neptune is located, which is the 9th house, and also over the house where the Moon is located, which is the 1st house. Now, Neptune also rules Pisces, and the Moon rules Cancer. So you see that Venus is making its influence felt all over the chart. In the 7th house, by being located there, in the 11th house, in the 6th house, through sign rulership. Remember, Venus rules Libra and rules Taurus. In the 9th house, by aspecting Neptune, who is located in there, and in the 1st house, by aspecting the Moon, who is located there. And to a lesser degree, in the 4th house, which is ruled by Neptune through Pisces, and the 8th house, which is ruled by the Moon through the sign Cancer. And through these subtle interactions and connections, astrology provides us with an infinite amount of nuances, which makes it practically impossible for any two charts to be alike. And now, let's return to our jumps. These jumps are very predictable and can be easily determined by looking at an ordinary ephemeris. Up to January the 18th, Jupiter is moving retrograde through the 20-degree area of Leo. The 20-degree area of Leo is the 3rd decanate of Leo, which corresponds to Aries. In other words, as Jupiter proper was moving retrograde through the 3rd decanate of Leo, its decanate twin was moving retrograde through Aries. Keep in mind that the decanate twin of a planet moves in the same direction as the actual planet. If the planet is moving retrograde, the twin moves retrograde. If the planet moves direct, the twin moves direct. On January the 19th, Jupiter leaves the 20-degree area of Leo and enters the teens. The 10-degree area of Leo is the 2nd decanate of Leo, which corresponds to Sagittarius. And as you can see, the decanate twin then moves retrograde through Sagittarius. To illustrate this in an environment that's more familiar to you, let's look at all the planets' jumps in 2015, beginning with Mars and going outwards, like Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And then see how those jumps would show up in the chart of the United States. So all you mundane astrologers, you might find this very interesting, and any feedback you can give me at the end of this year would be appreciated. So here's the chart of the United States On the right side, I have listed all the signs in order. The blue column, Aries through Pisces, which also represents the first decade of each sign. Remember, the first 10 degrees of each sign correspond to the entire sign. In the next column, it shows the second decade. For instance, the second decade of Taurus would be Virgo, of Libra would be Aquarius, of Capricorn would be Taurus, and so on. And then in the third column, I show the third decade. So the third decade of Aries would be Sagittarius. The third decade of Virgo would be Taurus. The third decade of Pisces would be Scorpio. Just a quick reference table to help you with the following explanations. Now here you see Mars. On January the 12th, it has reached the very end of Aquarius. Now, we cannot, in the decade chart, just say the end of Aquarius. We must stipulate which decade of Aquarius. So in this case, it would be the end of the third decade of Aquarius. Looking at our chart on the right side, we see that the last decade of Aquarius corresponds to the sign Libra. Therefore, Mars's Decanate Twin is jumping from the end of Libra in the 11th house to the beginning of Pisces in the 3rd house. And here are some 11th house meanings. And also some 3rd house meanings. And Mars's keywords are heat and activation. Now that you're familiar with the basic process, let's look at all the other jumps in 2015 and again relate them to the chart of the United States. On January 24th, Mars leaves the first decade of Pisces and enters into the second decade, which corresponds to the sign of Cancer. And thus, Mars's decade twin once more jumps from the end of Pisces in the 4th house to the beginning of Cancer in the 7th house, conjuncting Venus, Jupiter, Sun, and Mercury as it moves through Cancer. By the way, the Sun rules our president. If you would like a quick synopsis of what the houses and the planets signify in mundane astrology, go to this site. Mars moves rapidly, therefore its decade twin performs lots of jumps as the year progresses. Let me just give you one more example, and then we'll discuss some of the slower moving planets. On February the 6th, Mars's decade twin leaves the second decade of Pisces, which corresponds to Cancer, and enters into the third decade of Pisces, which corresponds to Scorpio. Therefore, it jumps from the end of Cancer to the beginning of Scorpio, from the 8th house into the 11th house. Now let's see what Jupiter is doing. On January the 18th, Jupiter is moving retrograde. It is moving out of the third decade of Leo, which corresponds to Aries, into the second decade of Leo, which corresponds to Sagittarius. So therefore, Jupiter is jumping from the beginning of Aries back to the end of Sagittarius, from the 4th house back to the 1st house. Quickly, some of the meanings of Jupiter with respect to mundane astrology. But remember, this video is not about mundane astrology, it's about decade jumps. It is now June 21st. Jupiter has in the meanwhile turned direct and is now leaving the second decade of Leo, which corresponds to Sagittarius, and enters the third decade of Leo, which corresponds to Aries, meaning Jupiter is jumping from the end of Sagittarius to the beginning of Aries, from the 1st house back into the 4th house. Next, we look at Saturn's decade twin. On June the 14th, it performs a retrograde jump from the beginning of Sagittarius, the 1st decade, into the last decade of Scorpio, which corresponds to Cancer. In other words, it is jumping from the beginning of Sagittarius to the end of Cancer, from the 12th house back into the 8th house. Now it is September the 17th. Saturn has turned direct, and this Decanate Twin is jumping from the end of the third decade of Scorpio, which corresponds to Cancer, back to zero Sag. In other words, back from the 8th house to the 12th house. Only two jumps remain, both by Uranus's Decanate Twin. The first one occurs on June the 20th, when Uranus's Decanate Twin is leaving the second decade of Aries, which corresponds to Leo, and enters into the third decade of Aries, which corresponds to Sagittarius. In other words, there will be a jump from the end of Leo to the beginning of Sagittarius, from the 9th house into the 12th house. And now it is August 31st. Uranus has turned retrograde, and its Decanate Twin is jumping out of the third decade of Aries, which corresponds to Sagittarius, into the second decade of Aries, which corresponds to Leo. In other words, there will be a jump from Sagittarius back to Leo, from the 12th house into the 9th house. Well, this pretty much covers my explanation of how Decanate Twins move through the zodiac, either by transit or progressions. I hope you've learned something. I hope you're a little bit intrigued, to the point maybe where you even want to try the Decanate chart system. You can find out more about it by going into my website called astrologyfrontiers.com. In my next video, I will explain to you two more concepts having to do with the Decanate chart. One, which I call the incognito chart. It reveals things about you, shows things about you that the ordinary horoscope will not show. And then the other concept is what I call family degree areas. To find out what those two are all about, you'll have to watch my next video, which will be out shortly. Have a happy, healthy new year, happy astrologing, and stay well. Thank you for your time.